want to qualify what it is I'm going to speak about because it's in the context of what I know best and what I've experienced. I didn't want to take in too many issues, and what the danger of sort of speaking on this subject in this context is that there's so many facets to it, as you well know, and everyone has these individual experiences. So my experience has been in the world of entrepreneurship, and I was born in 1963, and by most estimates, the city, you know, by those things that they rate communities by, the city has been in decline since the 60s in terms of population growth, in terms of some of the infrastructural issues. And whether you argue with that or not, I don't want to take any credit for that, but it's no denying that it sort of started at my birth. And I wanted to, but that sort of drove me, I guess, in my professional career, again, not in any elegant way, sort of leading with my chin and stumbling forward into this sort of quest to have some impact. So it kind of led me to mash up very naively with a group of people about 10 years ago to co-found an organization called the Idea Village. And the conversation that we had at that time, which was interesting to me, was it was about economic development, it was about entrepreneurship, but it was about, really the naive thought was that entrepreneurship could be a source of social transformation in the community. That was the most compelling aspect of that. So the thinking was that by having more engaged people in the community, more motivated, engaged people in the community with more opportunity to play and participate and have access, so that transcends things from social justice to actually making money, creating wealth, creating jobs. It's that we'd have more people showing up at boards and more people engaged in the political process and more people involved in those things that matter in our community. And then professionally, what I did for myself to make a living, because I wanted to have impact, was that I chose to do God's work. I got into advertising. And so I was a co-founder of an advertising agency called Trumpet that Nick talked about. And by most estimates, we did pretty good. We grew from about 40 people to about 40, 4 people to about 40. We started doing business all across the country. We had clients on both coasts, and we were doing the type of work. And really, I have to say that part of the MO was we wanted to have impact in the places we could have impact, but in a city with no real economy and no real clients out the door other than maybe political ones, we needed to get clients out of town. So in simple, one of the strategies was get business out of town. And so again, we sort of succeeded by those standards, but we maybe succeeded too well. And so this is Karl Marx's famous definition of what advertising is. And it was always sort of out there, you know. It was maybe in the corner of the mirror when you shaved in the morning, but you sort of had a sense of those things. And on your better days, you hoped that you weren't necessarily perpetuating that, but at the same time, you were aware of some of the unsavory aspects of it. But as we know, after Katrina, and this is a story that everyone has their version of it, we came back from that experience, and we basically, you know, we did what any sane, rational person would do. We fired all our out-of-town clients. We resigned everybody that we were working with out of town, and we decided to focus in on work within the community. So we had a chance to touch areas of the rebuild and the recovery, ranging from urban planning to public education reform, and very gratifying work because we were so fueled with this cocktail of emotion and a sense of purpose. And it gave us a sense of some things that we really wanted to do differently about our company. We'd also become sort of a startup Ellis Island. All these interesting baby companies were showing up at our doorstep, and we were finding out about all these people, this capacity in the community that we really weren't aware of. So we bought a 12,000 square foot building on the edge of the 7th Ward, and when we populated it with our agency in the middle of it, but also surrounded it with a cluster of social entrepreneurs, nonprofits, technology startups, media artists, just kind of a weird cacophony of interesting businesses from the community and developed something that was kind of interesting. And thought that, you know, the question was, what could we do with our footprint? What could we do as an advertising company with you know, 40 people and reach outside of the community? How could we better use that footprint? So physically, use it as a bit of a catalyst within a neighborhood that needed some revitalization. But also, let's use the fact that as a business, our job is to build businesses. So we're supposed to make more money for our clients, basically, and allow them to grow. Let's do that in a way that's more specific to the issues at hand within the community. Again, stumbling forward. I wouldn't advise this of anyone, by the way. It's a foolish thing. We raised a little bit of money, raised a couple $1 million, had never done that before, found a couple of worthy investments for it. So again, just trying to catalyze this thing. So we all familiar with MacGyver. So this really, we kind of described this as kind of a MacGyver moment for us. And I think it was sort of formed by so much of the strangeness and the uncertainty in the community. But it really brought out something in us that was there all along, kind of like you know, going down the yellow brick road, I guess, to find out about those things that we knew were there all along in the community, but really needed to be activated through experience and recognition that so many of us in this community felt and experienced afterwards. So the problem that I see so much with the notion of how you address these issues, how you sort of bring this, this opportunity forward is oftentimes, and I like to refer to it because I guess I'll never grow up, even though I was born in 1963, so I'm well into my midlife crisis. But the idea of the sober conversations that take place in the room about innovation, where people talk about why you shouldn't do something. And they have a million reasons why. They're beautiful, beautiful, elegant, more beautiful than anything I've ever created in my advertising career that tell you why you shouldn't do things. Wonderful flowcharts and all the dollars and figures and support of why you shouldn't do something. So in this equation, the first part, the risk management part, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, it makes sense. It works really well if you've got a community that works, if things kind of fit together. So if you're in Portland, things are kind of working well. I always like it, you know, when you go to Portland, you get out of your hotel, you know, you realize when you pass the third recharging station for automobiles that you're not in New Orleans anymore. But if you're in a place that has challenges, if you're in a place that has problems, like our community has had, certainly over my entire lifetime, it doesn't work well at all. That risk aversion is tragic, perhaps even criminal. But the second part is probably what got us into trouble, right? So risk management becomes that way of justifying shareholder value and profitability. So it causes you to do things that are not necessarily fair to employees. It causes you to do certain things that aren't necessarily correct for the environment. It causes you to justify things because it reduces cost, because the health of the organization is the ultimate goal. That's the number one priority, shareholder value. Well, we know where that's got us on a global level. We know that type of bad behavior just is no longer justifiable. But when you have nothing to lose, when your back's against the wall, then you'll do some things that you didn't do before. So what happened globally with this financial meltdown, people discovered some things that they maybe had avoided. And when your city is over 80% destroyed, you find yourself in a situation where you might do something a little bit differently. And you ask questions of yourself that you probably didn't ask before, or maybe didn't force yourself to answer before. So one of the great benefits of that situation is that it's a magnet for a number of things. So it's a magnet for talent and engagement, of which, you know, we've experienced, and that's a good thing if you're trying to seed entrepreneurship. It's good to have talented, motivated people running around. It also starts to bring more of a fluid level of collaboration together. And it also starts to put into perspective, and we're really experiencing this on a number of levels, the idea of what it really costs to start a business. The fact is, when the higher the circumstances, the higher the difficulty associated with the lower the cost of starting a business, because you have less to lose. And That's been a real byproduct of so many things that's happened on the global economy, but it also became something that was very much apparent here. So in many ways, our community got that head start on so many of these issues. So we know about St. Brad, but it's an entrepreneurial gesture, whether or not you agree or disagree with it. I see Alan out there. I know Alan has some things to say about some of those houses that are being built, but the bottom line is that the ambition associated with addressing the problem, trying to build environmentally correct, affordable, zero-energy type housing to address an issue, it's not purely an act of compassion. It's an opportunistic act. It's an act of will. It's an act of ego and hubris and all those things that go into entrepreneurship, but it was also a byproduct of circumstances. So we got our 2-year head start on this global recession here in New Orleans, and what's interesting about that is that it's developed a capacity and a capability here that I think is rather instructive for the rest of the country. So I was at the airport, and I changed a bunch of visuals in my presentation. So I grabbed my camera phone. I was on my way to Miami for the grand opening of the first Naked Pizza franchise outside of New Orleans of 300. Thank you very much. 300 locations that are under contract. They're being developed, and so at the airport. So I noticed a few things. I was there. So the Harvard Business Review, if you can see that, had a big story about think like an entrepreneur, and on Inc. magazine had "Bring on the Entrepreneurs" on the cover. Now, this is, granted, overheated sort of headlines. You know, it would give, I'm sure it gives Warren Buffett a chubby, but the idea is that the notion is correct and interesting. And what I think is really interesting to me, having been in the trenches over these last, well, more than 5 years, but in a very sort of, I don't know, chaotic state over the last 5 years, sort of dealing with kind of the urgency of the entrepreneurial movement, is that, again, and I said this to Nick, we sort of discovered entrepreneurship in kind of a folk kind of way, in a way that's very New Orleans, and discovered it through the experience and through the people that came here and the compassion and the intelligence that was sort of lying latent. But now, here we are in 2010, and Harvard Business Review is writing articles about it. So they're giving it names like agile development and design thinking and lean startup. And this is stuff that we were actually doing several years ago, and I think it's again, very instructive for the rest of the country. So the article, Can Entrepreneurs Save the World?, was in that same conversation. This article was penned by the founders of Ashoka, you know, one of the leading social agent organizations in the United States, and asking this question about bringing together for-profit and nonprofit and community members together to solve major social problems. Again, 2010, September, something that's been going on in this community for 5 years. This little excerpt about world-class entrepreneurs reaching critical mass in surprising places. I love that. This was an article written about places like Beirut rather than Boston, but it really should have been places like New Orleans rather than New York. So again, this idea of what's sort of surfacing in this post-recession, post-mass media climate. Another excerpt about the time being ripe for a collaboration. These things have been going on for the last 5 years and have brought out some very principled, interesting companies. So this idea of out-of-the-box thinking, and what's interesting, and there are people in this audience here that get this, you've got, whether you're an entrepreneur that's not explicitly a social entrepreneur, or whether you are someone that's actually building something in this community that is addressing a severe social problem, the fact of it is that everything you're doing is inflected with an amazing attachment to the dynamics of this community. So you've got technology companies in this community like iSeats, like TurboSquid, who are populated by people that, in addition to creating businesses that are employing people and doing what they're fundamentally supposed to do, are also people that are leading major civic activities in this community. They are a part of the community that are engaging, using their talents to do the things that are bringing New Orleans forward. And so this added benefit is fundamental, but it's also become something that now came out of our community out of need and is now being institutionalized at a greater level as people ask questions about the way forward. more about the idea of incubators. And just touching on this observation about emerging market ventures creating a sort of an incubator-like climate. In this city now, there are several places now happening, the IP, which people know about, the Ice House, Entrepreneurs Row, and many, many others that are basically seeding these collaborations amongst entrepreneurs and creating greater capacity. Again, something that's been going on for 4 years, 5 years here in New Orleans. So as we sort of hit that reset on the global level, and people ask those questions, they're asking questions about meaning and what am I supposed to do with my life, what we hold here in this community is something that is largely instructive for the rest of the world. So we've hacked capitalism, and we've found a way to sort of do something that took a good idea and maybe made it better and work better for this time. And the final thought I'll leave with you is this, that I think that in our community, if we think about our legacy, is that we ought to articulate, just like Inc. 500 does every year, there should be a New Orleans 500 of those companies that are growing here, that are creating wealth, jobs, and opportunity, but there should be a social metric attached to that as well in terms of the people in the community that are doing things to bring this entire community forward, lending their talents and their heart to other aspects of the community, be it education or be it more traditional type of social ventures. So thank you.